Welcome to another stair building education series. Let's go ahead and jump right into it with our first video. Now here's a video that started out as a stairway that was going to be used for pets. Maybe a small dog that can't get on top of a couch or a bed, something like that. But then I realized that you could use this stairway for other things like trailers, maybe a small deck, mobile home, something like that. However, in this video, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to provide you with all of the measurements necessary to create something like this. And of course, this is the first time I've done that in one of my videos, even though I have provided some measurements in some of my other videos for different types of stairs. Now, this is actually a stairway I think most people can build with only a few simple instructions and of course all of the measurements so that the lumber can be pre-cut either at a lumber yard or even a home improvement center or any place that would pre-cut all of your materials for you. If not, and you have your own tools, then it's going to be a little bit less hassle for those who work at these other stores. So let's go ahead and break it down and take a look at some of our measurements here. And you can use other size materials. For example, if you want wider steps, you can always use 2x8, but we're going to be using 2x6 and 1x2s. So the dimensions for our 1x2 is going to be 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. And of course you have the length right here, 1 foot 10 inches and 2 foot 9 inches. And the size of our 2x6 is going to be 1.5 inches by 5.5 inches. And I mentioned using 2x8. You could always use 2x4s for this also if you wanted it to be a little smaller. And of course the sizes for our 2x6 is going to be 5.25 inches. We're going to need 2 of them. And then 1 foot 3/4 inches, 12 3/4 inches for the next 2 boards. And then 1 foot 8.25 inches or 20.25 inches for the taller 2x6. And for the next components and the last components that we're going to be showing with measurements will be 16 inches or 1 foot 4 inches for the 2x6 we're going to use for our steps or treads. And of course the bottom 1x2 will be 1 foot 4 inches wide or the same measurement as the step. And the ones on the sides will be 2 foot 6 inches. Now I also need to point out, and of course this is very important, I have not physically built one of these and would appreciate someone getting back to me if any of these measurements are incorrect. However, this is a scale model that I should be able to take accurate measurements from. Now when it comes to putting this thing together, you can do it a different way. You don't have to follow my instructions here. But for those of you who don't know what you're doing, let's stick to what I'm going to show you here. And I think the easiest way to assemble this stairway will be to put each one of these components together separately. And that can be done by simply attaching these components together with either nails or screws. Just make sure that the screws are at least 2 3/4 inches long. And if you're using nails, maybe a 16D nail would work fine. However, you will need to use smaller screws or smaller nails to attach the 1x to the 2x. Now you can use longer nails or screws, but they might be sticking through on the other side. And of course that could create a safety problem for anyone who's going to move the stairs. And this part is also relatively simple. You're simply going to scoot each one of the components next to the other one and then start attaching them together. So not too difficult. After these two are attached, simply slide this one over, attach it, slide this one over, attach it, and then repeat the process for the next 2 sections. And then we can go ahead and put the next 1x2 on, and of course it will be attached the same way. And for those of you wondering what size screws to use for this, maybe a 1 5/8 inch long screw. And of course, if the stairs are going to be on the exterior of a building, then maybe use galvanized, zinc-coated, or stainless steel screws. And then to assemble the other side, just simply repeat the process that I already provided you with for this side. The next step will be to install the 1x2s on the bottom. And in order to do that, we're just simply going to install the 2 on each side or at the front and the back of the stairway. And then install the other 2 on the other sides. So not too difficult. Flip the stairway back over and you're good to go. And it's not going to be that much more difficult to make the stairs a little wider. All you will need to do is to make these two components a little longer, and that'll be the bottom 1x2 here, or each one of the 2x6 you're going to use for the steps. Now, I wouldn't suggest going any longer than 3 feet for a stairway like this, because the treads could be a little weak. And of course, that isn't going to be good. You're going to want your stairs to be nice and strong. So now would be a good time for me to point out that I am planning on making a few more of these videos. Here is a video that was inspired by the current lumber prices. It is May 4th, 2021, and they are just out of control. So I figured I would do my part and try and provide my viewers with a stairway that might be relatively inexpensive to build. However, I do need to point out that I have never built this stairway before and don't really know how strong it's going to be. However, I can tell you that we are going to use 1x6 for the entire stairway, and we are going to start with this frame at the bottom, and I will provide you with the measurements for each one of these items as we go along. And at the same time, I will try to point out wherever I can the areas where you will be attaching them with screws or nails. And you can use 8D nails, 7D nails, or you can use screws that are 1 3/4 to 2.5 inches long. And in this area here, I would recommend between 2 and 3 screws or nails to attach this board to this one, same on the other side. And in case you didn't get it, this board is the same size as this one. And next up, let's go ahead and install our treads, or the boards for our steps, and they will be 36 inches long, or the same size as this one here. Now, you can change the width of your stairway by simply changing the length of these boards. That would be your risers and your treads. I just wouldn't recommend going too much wider than this. However, you could always make it a little shorter. And this stairway might actually be portable to where you could carry it if you did make it a little shorter. All of the steps will have a 1-inch nosing also. If you were to change this measurement, then you might need to readjust the lengths of these boards. And I should point out that the 1x6 we're using are going to be 3/4 of an inch thick, or have a 3/4 inch thickness, and a 5.5 inch width or depth. And you don't need to follow my instructions. If you can figure out an easier way, then feel free to do it. So next up on the list will be to build our back wall, and this can be done by laying both of these boards on the bottom and then lining these boards up with the edge of this board here. And if you can, try to make sure that the measurement from here to here and from here to here is the same size. That's how you will know that this is going to be square. If not, you can always use a framing square or some other type of square to square this frame up. And I would recommend doing the same thing to here. And that can be done before you put these treads on. You can just simply measure from this corner to this corner and from this corner to this corner to make sure that everything is square, and then put your treads on. And even if you're off a little bit, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. And of course, to attach these boards to the other boards, you will need to use smaller nails or screws. And I would recommend between 3 and 5 nails or screws per section here, and space them out in the best way you can. That doesn't mean to put 5 of them all right here. One here, one here, one here, one here, one here, something like that. And then after you have the frame built, you can stand it up like this and then attach this with screws, and try to make sure that if this is square right here, that this right here is going to be plumb or vertically level. But again, if it's off just a little bit, it shouldn't create a problem, because there's a good chance you'll be able to make minor adjustments throughout the building of the stairway. Next up, we will add the next riser and sideboards, and you can always use spacers if you want to. I think it would be helpful to simply cut a few spacers the same thickness as the treads, and you could even space a couple of them out here, or rip one the full length if you think that will be necessary. So not too difficult. We're simply going up And of course here I have some screws sticking up, and I wanted to show you that along with a couple of nails or screws here to provide you with an idea of how this stuff can be assembled. And I think the best advice I could give you would be to install screws and nails wherever you have boards that are going to be connecting together. For example, you could attach this tread to this riser by having screws or nails going down and then maybe spacing them anywhere from 4 to 10 inches apart along the top here and on the bottom. And that's why I got these coming up here. And of course I will let you choose the length of the screws that you feel will be necessary. And of course another view of it there, the screws. And I don't think nails are going to work as good here as the screws will, because they will hold a little better while there's pressure being placed on this backboard here. And if at any time after you have built this you notice that one of these boards starts to move, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to place some type of structural blocks or something underneath the treads that would go in between the bottom of the tread and the top of the floor that the stairs are going to be sitting on. In other words, don't continue to use any stairs, including these, if they are unsafe. And I'm sure that makes sense to most of us. Next up, let's go ahead and add our final riser and side pieces. And the only thing we're going to do different here that we haven't done before will be to add this piece of 1x6 that should be located in the center of the riser. And of course, this board can be attached from both sides, and you could always use construction adhesive or sealant, some type of bonding agent, anywhere you feel is necessary for this project to make it a little stronger. So after this has been installed, you can install the treads, and then by now you should have something that looks like a stairway. However, we're not done yet, and we will need to add a structural brace. This will help prevent it from moving, and in some cases you might not even need this brace. Now I have a fancy cut up here and down at the bottom, but you don't need that. If you can just cut it to where you can get some nails and screws in on these points, then you should be fine. So again, if these cuts are a little too difficult, don't worry about it. And then I would recommend installing some type of blocks like this. This is going to prevent these boards from moving here while you're walking up and down the stairway, or at the very least reduce the movement. Now I have some screws going in from the bottom, and I would recommend driving a few screws in from the bottom and then going on top and then driving the rest of the screws down from the treads into the scrap piece of lumber. And again, you can get carried away and put as many screws in there as you feel like it, or just put a few screws, and then if everything works, then you're good to go. If not, and you get some movement in the treads, then go ahead and install some more screws. Now, even though I made this video so that you could use 1x6 throughout the entire stairway, if you don't want to put these blocks in here, get some 1x12, and then you shouldn't have to worry about it. Or use the 1x6, and you can always add a couple of more of these blocks. For example, you could have one in the center like we have here, or two of them to where you have them spaced more in a 1/3 type of measurement. So for example, if this is 3 feet, you could always have one here about 12 inches and another one here about 12 inches, and then not one in the center. Or you could have one in the center and then just put a couple of more next to it. I mean, if you think about it, people are going to be walking down the center of the stairway. So this is usually going to be the ideal spot for some type of support, blocks, bracing, whatever you're going to use to stabilize the stairway steps. And the last thing I want to point out in the video is that this board right here will need to be a little bit smaller. And the reason for that would be to keep all of the treads the same size. So you could always measure the treads and then measure the riser height to make sure that they are exactly the same all the way up. So if we left this a little longer, then the last step would just be a little bit longer. And obviously that won't be the end of the world, but this is what your stairway should look like. And if you do end up building one of these, I would love to make sure that all of my measurements are correct, and then leave a comment suggesting that they are in the video description area. And of course, this would include any methods that you come up with to make this stronger or faster and easier to assemble. So with that said, let's go ahead and wrap this video up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment area, and don't forget to thumbs up the video if you enjoyed it or found something useful in it.